So moving on, the theme of this panel is the interior and cultural productions. That's looking at the interior and its role within cultural production, but also as a cultural production in itself. And we have three fantastic speakers to discuss this. An artist, Lucy McKenzie, a designer, art director and artist, Peter Saville, and a curator, Andrew Wilson. And we're going to start with Lucy, who was born in Glasgow but now lives in Brussels. The interior has always been a central theme of her work, both in terms of content and technique. She studied decorative painting and has applied those techniques recurrently in her work. Some of you may have seen her work at the Painting Now exhibition at Tate Britain last summer. Lucy is going to talk about one of her current projects. It's the restoration of a 1930s house in Ostend in Belgium, which she describes as having a very complex history and being a unique interior. So over to Lucy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Adolf Loos, we'll see you later. The content of my talk has changed a little bit from what's in your booklet, but I'll jump right in. This is a house called the Ooievaar, which is Dutch for the stork, and it's a villa in Ostend on the Belgian coast, and it was built in 1935. And I bought it last year. It had been on the market for, I think, over 6 years, because nobody wants to buy a huge rundown villa that they can't flip and turn into holiday flats or a restaurant, because it's extremely protected by heritage laws. And I paid less for it than you can get a single bedroom flat in Clerkenwell. I checked online. And it's a building typical of the interwar period, where private houses still contained a lot of ostentatious materials like marble. This is another example from that kind of period. It's the Villa Tugendhat by Mies van der Rohe in Brno, Czech Republic. And it was built in 1928, and it contains a solid onyx wall that the sun would shine through in a specific time of year. And when that house was commandeered by the communists at the end of the Second World War, their horses were stabled in the room. To find preserved period interiors is very rare. I'm from Glasgow, where the architecture from Glasgow's golden age has, by and large, just been chopped up into bedsids. Here's a friend's place. You can see that the window's been kind of chopped in two by a partition wall. And in Glasgow, it's either bedsits or they just retain the facade. But this place had its original owner until the 1990s, and the person I bought it from had only done maintenance work to the building. And my plan is to turn it into a dream space. And what does that mean? Well, I'm interested in architecture and interiors as a visual artist. So how the actual space relates to things like plan drawings. You know, when I think about a building, I think about the drawings because I like to draw. And I love just the puzzle of how, a drawing like this, how that room fits together three-dimensionally from a two-dimensional drawing. I love that puzzle. And I also love scale models of buildings. The relationship of the aspirations of the original idea to the realised building, and how drawings and models generate a different kind of potential and are basically just dreamy. This is a model of the Ooievaar. And I should also mention that I only own part of the majority of the building, but not all of it, so it's not as crazy as it looks. Now, the elegance and the quality of the design of this house is extremely conducive to fantasy. And this is another interior, another building which I find very conducive to fantasy. It's the Palais Stoclet in Brussels. And part of the reason it's so seductive is that it's absolutely closed to the public. It's not a museum, it hasn't been restored, and nobody gets to go in there. Rem Koolhaas couldn't get in, Raf Simons couldn't get in, and I can't get in. So all we have is these kind of photographs, and they've got a double marble bath. Now, I know this is a bit of a cliche, but interiors are never, ever neutral. If you think about Charles Rennie Mackintosh with his genderized colour coding, dark for the public, masculine spaces, and light for the private, feminine areas. And then to Adolf Loos. This is the beautiful Villa Müller. You know, Adolf Loos was interested in engineering private life as a kind of hysterical, repressed chamber drama. And I also don't think it's trite to mention that all the great historic buildings were maintained by abject domestic labour. And they all contained clear demarcations of space for men and women, employers and employees. And they're beautiful. And now with the Ooievaar, I have exactly one of these kind of unneutral spaces to play with. And I'm going to make this building somewhere to blur public and private, somewhere to make work in and for people to stay and collaborate and be inspired by. Now, my own life and work are not separate at all. I collaborate with friends and loved ones all the time, and the only kind of space that I need is one that generates ideas and situations. I don't need a weekend place, I don't need a beach place, an ideal home, I don't need to live the dream. I need somewhere that you can do shit. And this is the hallway of this house. And as an artist who works almost exclusively with found material and appropriation, and who's especially interested in notions of morality in relation to appropriation, which I'll come back to later, I can inhabit this over-determined house as an extension of that interest in appropriation, because its character and its history are overwhelming. So it was built in 1935 by the Flemish architect Joseph de Broeker for his friend Dr. de Poit and his wife and family and his doctor's surgery. And that's the part that I don't have. And there are 13 children. And this was the special bathroom for washing babies. Joseph de Broeker was involved with Flemish modernism in the interwar years. He often collaborated with this artist, Victor Savranx, on furniture. De Broeker also had a furniture company, and Savranx would paint the furniture, and he would make furniture for him, and this kind of Gesamtkunstwerk. Now, the entire building was strongly influenced by a Dutch architect called Dudok, and this is Dudok's design for the Hilversum Town Hall. And the interior of the Ooievaar is eclectic, to say the least. It's a mixture of high deco, streamline, modern, inspired by ocean liners and cinemas of the time. And part of it is almost de stijl. Here's a geometric baby crib. And then some of the house is neo-Gothic Flemish Renaissance. And that's there, this more traditional design, because it was requested by Mrs. de Poit, because she saw the dining room as her domain, so she could decide on a more conservative design. The family crests are etched into the windows. And de Broeker, the architect, his daughter told me that he designed with the client's desires uppermost, which is the opposite of this kind of autocratic idea we have of architects, where clients are expected to dress in clothes fitting the decor of the building, this kind of thing. And it's an example of real stylistic impurity, design bent to fit the needs and desires of the actual inhabitants, which makes it so idiosyncratic. In the house there's things like little pull-out barriers to pen in children, and it's overflowing with locks and keys so that anything that could be locked can be locked. But then on the other hand, they have like a door where you can step from the shower straight onto a terrace. It's very kind of sensual, so it's a big puzzle. Now, the client, Dr. de Poit, was a bourgeois Catholic and a Flemish nationalist, and like his friend de Broeker, they were both committed and enthusiastic Nazi collaborators during the Belgian occupation. And de Broeker was placed on the town council by the fascists, which is part of the reason that his work isn't so well known or celebrated in Belgium or beyond, I think, and his family think as well. And I've been trying to research the historic decor of the far right to very little avail for a long time. There's not a lot of material on the interior design of the Nazi period, the fascist period. But when I bought this house, I knew almost nothing about this history. So it's an incredible kind of coincidence. And this house is just such a paradox. It's a combination of conservative, religious, and provincial far-right politics, but with this avant-garde design. And my plan is to make it mine. I neither want to subvert or emulate the taste of the time, but what I really want to do is it will just by default reflect the disconnect with its original function and now, because it was a house that was built in the heart of the Flemish establishment, but no more. Now, in my work in general, I use interiors as subject matter for paintings, but I rarely envisage these works functioning as actual interior decor of private homes when I make them. There are many contemporary artists whose work fulfills that role comfortably because it fits perfectly the prevailing politics and aesthetics of the art-consuming public, namely a kind of bourgeois modernism. Now I reference periods like the Neo-Gothic or Art Nouveau, not just because I'm just innately attracted to them, but because I find they stylistically contradict current orthodoxies for styles like mid-century modernism. And I may love a designer like Eileen Gray, but reference her in an artwork would, I feel, just be taking advantage of her inherent value as a marginalised genius and a feminist icon. So I prefer to look at design situations outside of the grand narrative of modernism and things that I feel would be less vulnerable to appropriation or colonisation. Take someone like Owen Jones. He's not, like, Owen Jones isn't a marginal figure, but he's much less known and celebrated than someone like William Morris, who he related to. Now, Jones single-handedly invented large-scale polychrome spatial design for the Great Exhibition in 1851, and he rationalised design and colour theory more than 50 years before the Bauhaus. He also celebrated non-Western ornament, such as facial tattoos in the Maori, and this was completely against the prevailing architectural and decorative prejudices of the time, people like Ruskin, who just believed in a pure Western ornament. Decorative painting. Methodical, formulaic, and commercial. It has a whole history of its own, which occasionally influences fine art in pop art or pattern and decoration. But artists who work with decoration often distance themselves from the bona fide fine arts, applied arts, to underscore the distinction and to maintain the value of their work, and I'm included in that. But it's also just paint. It's just paint on canvas or paint on paper. And I studied it. I studied decorative painting to be able to combine a kind of formality of expression with a subversiveness of thought. I want to create tension between a conservative art form and the subjects that interest me, which are to do with sexuality, power structures, accepted norms. And I use fake marble for several reasons. It's a symbol of empire, history, prestige, academy, value. And these conditions it used to represent have not disappeared. They've just stylistically adapted to something else to appear dressed down and transparent. My marble is as fake as the open plan equality of the HQs of multinational tech firms. This is some work that's on show in Prague at the moment, made together with the Belgian artist Laurent Dupont. And marble is a precious natural resource, which is why I never use it. And in this, it can be used as a metaphor for scarce, valuable cultural content that is constantly mined and polished up into works of contemporary art. Subculture, political and ecological alternatives, the history of the avant-garde, they're all commodified by artists. And this is what I mean when I say I'm interested in a morality of appropriation. Thank you.